She thought she could shame a black woman off the plane with lies and racism, but she messed with the wrong one. When a self-entitled passenger accused her of stealing a seat, she didn't expect the calm clapback that followed, because the woman she tried to humiliate wasn't just any traveler. She was a senior federal prosecutor. What happened next left the entire cabin speechless, and justice soaring at 35,000 feet. The cabin of Flight AF-312 hummed with the low drone of engines as the Airbus A350 climbed into the night sky above Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport. The lights of the city glittered below like a scattering of fallen stars, before fading into the black expanse of the Atlantic ahead. It was a routine red-eye to New York, 8 hours of restless sleep, stale coffee, and the occasional cry of a restless toddler. For most of the 300 passengers aboard, it promised to be uneventful, but not for everyone. In row 14, seat C, Eleanor Grayson adjusted her cashmere scarf and glared at the woman seated beside her in 14B. Eleanor, a 52-year-old British expatriate living in Paris, had boarded the flight with an air of entitlement that matched her designer handbag and perfectly coiffed blonde bob. She'd spent the last decade managing a luxury boutique in the 8th arrondissement, and she wore her privilege like a second skin. The woman next to her, however, was an affront to that carefully curated world. Her name was Nia Carter, a 38-year-old black woman with a calm demeanor and a sleek leather satchel resting at her feet. Nia's dark hair was pulled into a neat bun, and she wore a tailored blazer over a crisp white shirt, professional, understated, and entirely unremarkable. She'd settled into her seat with a paperback novel and a pair of noise-canceling headphones, intent on passing the flight in peace. Eleanor had other plans. "Excuse me," Eleanor said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the ambient noise of the cabin. She leaned forward, her blue eyes narrowing. "I don't think you belong here." Nia paused, her finger holding her place in the book. She removed one headphone and turned her head slightly. "I'm sorry?" "This seat," Eleanor snapped, gesturing at 14B with a manicured hand. "I saw you come from the back of the plane. Economy's that way. Did you sneak up here? Because I paid extra for this section, and I'm not about to let someone—" She paused, her lips pursing, as if the next words were too distasteful to say aloud. "Take what's mine." Nia's expression remained steady, though a flicker of something, amusement perhaps, crossed her face. "I assure you, I'm in the right seat. I have my boarding pass if you'd like to see it." Eleanor scoffed. "Oh, I'm sure you have something. Probably lifted it off someone else. I've seen how this works. You think you can just waltz in here and—" She raised her voice, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. "I want to speak to someone now." A flight attendant, a young Frenchman named Julien with a practiced smile, approached quickly. "Madam, is there a problem?" "Yes, there's a problem," Eleanor said, her tone dripping with indignation. "This woman doesn't belong here. She's probably stolen that ticket, and I won't sit next to her for 8 hours. I demand you check her credentials, or better yet, move her back where she belongs." Julien hesitated, glancing between the two women. Nia sat quietly, her hands folded over her book, watching the scene unfold with an eerie calm. "Madam," Julien said to Nia, "may I see your boarding pass, please?" "Of course," Nia replied, reaching into her satchel. She handed over the slip of paper, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Julien examined it, then nodded. "Everything seems in order. She's assigned to 14B. Eleanor's face reddened. "That's impossible. She doesn't look like she can afford this seat. I'm telling you, she's lying. Check her ID. Do your job." The accusation hung in the air, thick and ugly. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting toward the confrontation. A man in a business suit across the aisle muttered something under his breath, and a teenage girl a row ahead peeked over her seat, phone discreetly angled to record. Nia tilted her head, her voice low but firm. "You're making a scene over nothing. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Nothing?" Eleanor spat. "You're a thief. I've dealt with people like you before, thinking you can take what isn't yours. I won't stand for it." She turned to Julienne. "If you won't handle this, I'll escalate it. Get the captain." Julienne's smile faltered. "Madam, please calm down. There's no evidence of—" "Evidence!" Eleanor interrupted, her voice rising to a near shriek. "She's sitting here, isn't she? That's evidence enough. I want her gone." The cabin was fully awake now, a ripple of tension spreading through the rows. Nia sighed, closing her book with a soft thud. She reached into her satchel again, this time pulling out a slim leather wallet. She flipped it open, revealing a gold badge that glinted under the overhead lights. The words "United States Department of Justice" were etched in bold letters, followed by her name, Nia Carter, Assistant United States Attorney. Eleanor froze, her mouth half open mid-rant. "I'm a federal prosecutor," Nia said, her tone even but laced with steel. "I've spent the last week in Paris working with Interpol on a human trafficking case. This seat? I booked it with my own money, earned through a law degree from Yale and 15 years of putting criminals behind bars. So if anyone's out of line here, it's not me." The silence that followed was deafening. Julien's eyes widened, and he took an involuntary step back. The teenage girl's phone dipped slightly, her jaw dropping. Eleanor's face drained of color, her hands trembling as she clutched her scarf. Eleanor stammered, her bravado crumbling. "I didn't mean—" "You did," Nia cut in, her gaze unwavering. "You meant every word. You saw my skin and decided I didn't belong. You accused me of theft without a shred of proof. And now you're sorry. Not because you were wrong, but because you're scared." Eleanor shrank into her seat, her lips quivering. I'm not a racist. I just thought—" "Stop," Nia said, raising a hand. "I don't need your excuses. I've heard them all before. From defendants, from witnesses, from people like you who think they're above accountability. But here's the thing. I don't let it slide." Julien cleared his throat, clearly eager to diffuse the situation. "Ladies, perhaps we can—" "No," Nia said, turning to him. "She wanted the captain. Let's get him. I'd like to report a disturbance, harassment, false accusations, and a potential safety risk. I'm happy to document it all when we land." Eleanor's eyes widened in panic. "No, please, I didn't mean it. I'll stop, I swear." Nia studied her for a long moment, then leaned back in her seat. "You're lucky I'm off duty. But don't think this ends here." The captain, a grizzled American named Tom Hargrove, arrived minutes later, his presence commanding attention. After hearing both sides and verifying Nia's credentials, he offered Eleanor a choice: apologize publicly to Nia and the passengers, or face a formal report upon landing, with potential charges for disorderly conduct. Eleanor, tears streaming down her face, chose the former. Standing in the aisle, her voice shaking, she muttered an apology. "I'm sorry for what I said. It was a mistake. I didn't know who she was." Nia didn't respond, her eyes fixed on the window as the plane cut through the clouds. The cabin settled into an uneasy quiet, but the weight of the encounter lingered. Passengers whispered among themselves, some casting sympathetic glances at Nia, others avoiding eye contact with Eleanor who spent the rest of the flight staring at her hands, humiliated and silent. When the plane touched down at JFK, Nia gathered her things and stood, her poise unshaken. As she passed Eleanor, she paused. "Next time, think before you speak. Not everyone will let it go." Eleanor nodded mutely, unable to meet her gaze. Nia walked off the plane, disappearing into the terminal. Eleanor lingered, fumbling with her bag, as passengers streamed past. A woman in a hijab brushed by her, and Eleanor flinched, then caught herself. She stepped into the jetway, her shoulders hunched, the weight of her actions settling in. Back in the terminal, Nia pulled out her phone and dialed a colleague. "Hey, it's me. Just landed. Yeah, the case went well. But you won't believe what happened on the flight." As she recounted the story, a faint smile played on her lips, not of triumph, but of resilience. She'd faced worse than Eleanor Grayson and come out stronger every time. But the question lingered, unspoken. How many more Eleanors were out there, waiting in the wings? And what would it take for the world to change? The answer, like the horizon ahead, remained just out of reach.